It started like any other December in Maplewood Estates. A quiet, neatly trimmed suburban neighborhood where the biggest drama usually involved misplaced recycling bins or a dog off its leash. Every house looked identical, with manicured lawns, white fences, and matching mailboxes that gleamed in the winter sun. But when the holiday season arrived, each family expressed themselves in their own small way. A wreath on the door, a few strands of lights along the gutters, maybe a glowing reindeer on the lawn. Everyone, that is, except for the woman at the corner lot, Karen Miller. Karen was known across the neighborhood as the unofficial self-appointed aesthetic enforcer. She wasn't on the HOA board, but you wouldn't know that from the way she acted. She had opinions about everything, from mailbox paint colors to the appropriateness of Halloween decorations. And this year, she had found a new target. The homeowner directly across the street, a quiet, tech-savvy man named Alex Reed. Alex had recently moved into Maplewood Estates, excited to spend his first Christmas in his new home. He was a software engineer with a love for gadgets, automation, and holiday cheer. His plan was simple: to create an interactive, music-synced light display for Christmas, something bright and joyful that would bring smiles to passing families. He worked for weeks setting up his smart light system, carefully programming every bulb, testing the timing, and syncing it all to cheerful Christmas tunes. When he finally turned on his display for the first time, the result was magical. Lights twinkled in rhythm to the beat of classic carols. Trees sparkled in waves of color. The house itself seemed to dance with joy. Within hours, neighbors began driving by just to see it. Children pressed their faces against car windows, clapping as the lights pulsed and shimmered. It was wholesome, festive, the kind of thing that made people feel like kids again. But not everyone was impressed. From across the street, behind her neatly curtained windows, Karen watched with narrowing eyes. To her, Alex's light show wasn't festive. It was a tacky, noisy disruption. The reflections on her car windshield, the faint hum of the synchronized music, the gathering of cars in the evenings. All of it infuriated her. She believed it disrupted the peaceful, orderly character of the neighborhood she had worked so hard to maintain. The first complaint came the next morning. A neatly folded note appeared on Alex's doorstep, printed in a perfectly formatted font, signed only "A Concerned Neighbor." It scolded him for creating a public nuisance, warned that several residents found his lights disturbing, and insisted he tone them down immediately. Alex, amused, guessed exactly who had written it but decided to ignore it. After all, his show complied with every HOA guideline. He had checked twice. 2 days later, Karen's frustration escalated. She stood outside one evening, arms crossed, glaring across the street as families parked to watch the show. When one of them waved at her, she turned away with an exaggerated sigh, muttering loud enough for the whole block to hear. Alex didn't respond, pretending not to notice. But every night, the show continued, and every night, her anger grew louder. Then came the threats. She began sending emails to the HOA board, demanding they take action. She claimed the flashing lights were a hazard, that they distracted drivers and posed risks to epileptic individuals. She even said they were driving property values down. The HOA president, already tired of Karen's constant stream of complaints throughout the year, politely reminded her that Alex's decorations were fully within community regulations. This only made her angrier. The following evening, her shouting began. Standing in her driveway, phone in hand, she recorded videos of the light display, narrating her grievances at full volume. She shouted about light pollution, about ignorant neighbors, about how she wouldn't stand for this chaos. Some of the other neighbors began watching her more than the lights themselves. Her outbursts became a kind of sideshow. Alex, though patient, began to feel the tension. He loved his new home, and the last thing he wanted was a war with the neighbor across the street. But as her shouting grew louder and her complaints more absurd, he started thinking. Maybe there was a smarter way to deal with her. After all, he was a tech guy. He knew how to automate, synchronize, and program things to perfection. What if he used that skill not just for music, but for something else? One night, after another round of Karen's driveway yelling, He recorded the sound from across the street using a small microphone near his mailbox. Her voice carried easily, clear and sharp. Later, while reviewing the footage, he noticed something amusing. The rhythm of her ranting matched the beat of one of his Christmas songs almost perfectly. It was ridiculous. Her furious complaints, when layered over the music, sounded almost like lyrics. That's when the idea hit him. He spent the next few days tweaking his system. The smart lights were already capable of responding to audio input. Normally, that input came from his playlist. But now, he had another sound source to experiment with, Karen herself. He set up a program that would activate the lights whenever her voice reached a certain decibel level. The louder she got, the more vibrant the lights would become. The first test was subtle. One night, as Karen stood outside shouting about disrespectful displays, Alex stayed inside, pretending to be unaware. As soon as her voice hit that familiar high pitch, the house across the street suddenly lit up, flashing red, green, and gold in perfect rhythm with her words. When she paused, the lights dimmed. When she yelled again, they burst back into brilliance. From the perspective of anyone watching, it looked intentional, as if the lights were mocking her. Her furious gestures, her pointing finger, the rising pitch of her voice. Every movement seemed to command the display like a conductor leading an orchestra. The more she ranted, the more dazzling the light show became. And as other neighbors noticed, laughter began to spread. Within minutes, someone recorded it. The video, shaky and grainy, captured the sight of Karen shouting at the glowing house as it blinked and shimmered in response. It was absurd, hilarious, and oddly satisfying. When it hit social media, it spread like wildfire. The caption read, "When the HOA Karen meets the wrong neighbor." By the next morning, the clip had thousands of views. By that evening, it had hundreds of thousands. Alex's address wasn't revealed, but everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly where it happened. People started driving by not just for the light show now, but to see if the sinking Karen would make another appearance. And she did. But this time, it wouldn't end with laughter. As her public humiliation grew, Karen's fury reached a breaking point, and she was about to take things far beyond a neighborhood squabble. By the time a full week had passed, the once quiet street of Maplewood Estates had turned into something out of a holiday carnival. Cars lined the road each evening, engines idling as passengers leaned out of windows, waiting for the moment when the lights would respond to Karen's next outburst. Some brought popcorn, others brought cameras. Even local teenagers, always hungry for mischief, showed up just to see if they could catch a glimpse of the sync show in action. It became a running joke among the neighbors, a kind of unspoken entertainment that broke up the monotony of winter. But for Karen, it was a nightmare. What had started as mild irritation over a few Christmas lights had spiraled into a public spectacle, and she was at the center of it. Every day she woke up to new comments online, people mocking her, turning her name into a meme, and flooding the HOA Facebook group with laughing emojis whenever she tried to post another complaint. Her fury hardened into something colder, more vindictive. She saw herself as a victim, the only person brave enough to stand against the chaos. She told herself she was fighting for community standards, that she was the last line of defense against a neighborhood gone wild. But deep down, she was driven by humiliation. The sight of cars pulling up to admire Alex's lights felt like a personal attack. Every chuckle, every passing honk, every whisper from the neighbors she once scolded felt like salt in a wound she couldn't ignore, so she escalated. First, she called the police. On a quiet Tuesday evening, 2 patrol cars rolled up in front of Alex's house, their blue lights mingling awkwardly with the glowing reds and greens of his display. They spoke to him briefly, checked the decibel levels, inspected his permits, and then left, satisfied that nothing illegal was happening. Karen watched from her window, furious that the officers even smiled as they drove away. Next, she turned back to the HOA. This time, she didn't just file a complaint. She began a campaign. She printed flyers accusing Alex of willfully disturbing the peace, inviting trespassers, and undermining the moral integrity of the community. She slipped them into mailboxes late at night, hoping to rally support. But when the flyers surfaced the next morning, most residents laughed. Some even took pictures of them and posted them online under the tag #CareManifesto. The ridicule only fueled her determination. She began documenting everything, taking pictures of the cars parked on the street, the people watching, the lights themselves. She created a thick folder labeled Evidence of Harassment. In her mind, she was preparing for a righteous battle. Meanwhile, Alex remained calm, almost eerily so. He never confronted her. He never raised his voice or even acknowledged the viral fame his display was gaining. Each night, the lights turned on automatically at 6, synced to his playlist, and sometimes, purely by coincidence or perhaps by algorithmic mischief, they seemed to dance just as Karen's voice echoed from across the street. By the second week, the video had crossed 2 million views. News outlets picked it up. Headlines read things like, "Neighbors' Christmas lights sync to angry Karen's rants. Internet can't stop laughing." A local TV crew even drove out to Maplewood Estates, hoping to film the house. They were polite, careful not to reveal addresses, but their segment only added more attention. For Alex, it was surreal. He hadn't planned for any of this. It was just a joke, a bit of harmless tech tinkering that had spiraled into global amusement. For Karen, it was the ultimate humiliation. Her friends from church called to ask if it was really her. Her family members texted links to the videos. Even her adult son sent a message from college that simply read, "Mom, please stop." That night, she decided she'd had enough. She waited until after midnight, when the street was quiet, and crept out of her house wearing a dark coat. The air was bitterly cold, her breath forming little clouds as she crossed the road. She carried a small set of wire cutters and a flashlight. In her mind, she wasn't committing vandalism. She was restoring order. She convinced herself the lights were an illegal installation, that she had the right to take action since the HOA refused to. She knelt near one of the decorative shrubs that framed Alex's walkway and found the tangle of wires connecting the light system. Her heart raced. She imagined headlines about her bravery. "Local woman saves neighborhood from nuisance display." She reached out, gripping the cords tightly. But before she could make the cut, the entire yard lit up with blinding color. The motion sensors had caught her. Every strand of lights burst to life at once, casting her in a kaleidoscope of red and green. A mechanical voice, triggered by Alex's home security system, boomed from a nearby speaker. "Motion detected. Recording in progress." For a few seconds, she froze like a deer in headlights. Then she bolted, stumbling back across the street, nearly tripping over her own boots. Inside his house, Alex didn't need to move a muscle. The cameras caught everything. The next morning, the footage appeared online. A hooded figure sneaking through the yard, bathed in flashing light, retreating in panic as the system activated. It wasn't hard for people to guess who it was. Within hours, the comments section exploded. "Karen caught red-handed," one post read. "She really tried to fight the lights." The HOA board had no choice but to respond. They issued a formal notice warning residents against trespassing or tampering with private property. It didn't mention Karen by name, but everyone knew who it referred to. Her attempts to portray herself as the victim evaporated overnight. Even her closest allies on the board stopped taking her calls. Still, she refused to back down. In her mind, Alex was the villain, a manipulative techie who had orchestrated her humiliation. She convinced herself that he had doctored the footage, that the internet was conspiring against her. Her obsession grew darker. She began researching noise ordinances, electrical safety codes, anything that could be used against him. Late at night, lights from her house stayed on for hours as she pored over legal documents and scribbled notes. Across the street, Alex continued his quiet routine. He worked from home, kept his yard clean, and maintained his cheerful display. But he could feel the shift in her behavior. The glares from her window lasted longer. Her blinds twitched every time he stepped outside. He started double-checking his locks, reviewing his security footage more often. He knew she was planning something, and he was right. Because Karen's next move wouldn't just involve angry emails or petty sabotage. It would drag the HOA, the media, and even the police back into the picture. And this time, the consequences would ripple far beyond Maplewood Estates. Winter deepened over Maplewood Estates. The once jolly decorations that had made the neighborhood feel alive now seemed to flicker under a growing shadow. Snow blanketed the lawns, muffling sound, softening edges, but not the tension. Beneath the layer of frost, the feud between Alex and Karen had reached a dangerous boiling point. After the footage of her midnight trespassing spread online, Karen withdrew from sight. For days, her curtains stayed shut, her driveway empty. Neighbors whispered that she might have left town out of embarrassment, or perhaps been fined by the HOA. But those who lived closest noticed the glow of her television late into the night, the faint tapping of a keyboard, and the occasional flash of light from her living room window. She wasn't gone. She was plotting. Inside her home, Karen had turned her dining room into a war room. Papers were scattered across the table, printouts of HOA regulations, local ordinances, and screenshots of Alex's viral fame. She read them obsessively, marking passages in red ink, convinced there had to be a technicality she could exploit. Every mention of nuisance, light pollution, and community standards became a lifeline to justify her rage. Her walls were closing in, but she refused to be the villain in her own story. She convinced herself that Alex was mocking her deliberately, that the lights responding to her voice had been designed to torment her. She began referring to him, even in her private notes, as the bully across the street. Each night, she sat by her window, staring at his house, the lights twinkling innocently in the cold. And each night, she told herself she would end it, once and for all. When Christmas week arrived, the entire town was buzzing about the Maplewood Light Show. Alex's house had become a local legend. Even small businesses nearby advertised directions to the viral house. The HOA, trying to maintain order, installed temporary no parking signs along the street, but that only made the show more exclusive, the kind of thing people bragged about seeing in person. Alex, though overwhelmed by the attention, tried to stay grounded. He donated the ad revenue from the viral videos to a local children's hospital, hoping to turn the chaos into something positive. He even planned to tone down the lights after Christmas Eve, returning the neighborhood to its usual peace. He didn't want to keep poking the bear, even unintentionally. But the bear, as it turned out, was already wide awake on the evening of December 23rd. As light snow drifted through the air, Alex ran one final systems check before turning in. Everything was working perfectly: the sensors, the timers, the sound sync. The house was ready for the Christmas Eve finale. Across the street, Karen's house was dark, no movement visible behind her drawn curtains. For a moment, Alex let himself believe the worst was over. But sometime after midnight, while the neighborhood slept, the lights went out. Every bulb, every strand, every glowing reindeer figure, dark. The system had gone offline entirely. Alex discovered it early the next morning, frowning as he stepped outside into the cold. He checked the control box. The power had been manually cut. The cords had been pulled, neatly and deliberately, not yanked in haste but severed with precision. Whoever did it had known exactly what to target. That he pulled up his security footage, expecting to see the same dark-coated figure from weeks before. But the cameras had gone blank around 2:14 a.m., their feed interrupted just before the outage. Whoever had done it had also disabled his surveillance. Across the street, Karen's driveway was clear of footprints, her porch undisturbed. Her blinds remained closed, and her house looked untouched. But Alex knew. He didn't need proof to feel the truth pressing on him. By noon, the news of the blackout had spread. Visitors who came for the light show turned away disappointed. Some accused him of staging it for attention. Others assumed the HOA had finally shut it down. For Alex, it wasn't the loss of the lights that hurt. It was the feeling of being violated. His home, his creation, his peace had been invaded. That evening, he made a choice. He could have called the police again, but this time he decided to let his technology do the talking. He spent the entire night rebuilding the system, rerouting the power lines, reinforcing the camera feed, and adding a hidden wireless backup. When he finished, the house looked dormant, silent and dark. But beneath the stillness, everything was armed and ready. Christmas Eve arrived. Snow fell steadily, painting the neighborhood in shimmering white. Families visited one another, carrying gifts and laughter. From her window, Karen watched the dark shape of Alex's house and smiled for the first time in weeks. To her, the quiet street was a victory, proof that she had restored order. She poured herself a glass of wine and congratulated herself for saving the neighborhood from what she called the digital circus. But then, at exactly 7 p.m., the lights came back on. Not just in Alex's yard, everywhere. The trees, the fence, even the snow itself glowed as hidden lights embedded in the ground illuminated the street in soft gold. But this time, there was no music, no flashing patterns. Only a single, steady illumination. On the side of Alex's garage, a projection appeared. It wasn't a movie or a song. It was footage. The video played silently, showing a hooded figure creeping through the snow, cutting wires, disabling cameras. Every movement caught from multiple hidden angles. The image was clear, undeniable, and unmistakably her. From inside her house, Karen froze. Her glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. She stared at the projection, her pulse hammering. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He hadn't just rebuilt the lights. He had rebuilt the trap. Neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the strange glow. They stood in the snow, watching in stunned silence as the footage looped. No one said a word. The only sound was the faint hum of electricity and the distant carols from the nearby church. Within hours, the video was online. It spread even faster than the first one. This time, there was no ambiguity, no speculation, only proof. By Christmas morning, Karen's reputation, already fragile, had crumbled completely. The HOA expelled her from the board. Local police cited her for trespassing and property damage. She sold her house quietly within the month, her name forever linked to the story that had made the internet laugh. As for Alex, he took the lights down after the holidays, just as he'd planned. He didn't boast or gloat. He didn't speak to reporters or comment online. When asked about the viral saga, he simply said he hoped people remembered the laughter more than the feud. But those who lived on Maplewood Drive never forgot. Every year after that, when December rolled around, neighbors would set up small strings of lights that flickered in soft, rhythmic pulses, not to music, but to the memory of the most legendary holiday showdown their street had ever seen. And though no one ever saw Karen Miller again, some swore that if you listened closely on a snowy night, you could almost hear the faint echo of her voice, muttering from somewhere in the distance, right before the lights began to twinkle.